Hey everyone. So it's been snowing outside this morning. It's really cold in my studio. And eventually I think I might have to move these inside if it doesn't start warming up for spring. But we'll power through today, and hopefully I'll be so engrossed in the story I won't even notice that I'm freezing cold. All right, today is Chapter 15 of Love and Lovecraft. Away we go. He made a pot of Earl Grey and a plate of toast with marmalade, and we sat in the large empty kitchens wrapped in an awkward and uncomfortable silence, waiting for our mutual friend to return. On our travels from the tower to the main floor, I'd found my shawl and my shoe, but my hat was still missing somewhere in Northwich Hall's maze of corridors. As befitting a grand house, the kitchens were spacious enough for a full staff of cooks and helpers, with 3 iron stoves and a massive pantry, but Thorn had no staff to attend to him. While a kitchen in any other home is the heart and hub of all activity, the kitchens of Northwich Hall were drab and dreary, garlanded with dusty cobwebs, and held the aura of abandonment. The main table was a huge slab of oak wood, slashed and marred from generations of use as a cutting surface, and 3 mismatched chairs surrounded it. I saw no meats or cheeses in the larder, nor pots and pans, nor even a wooden spoon for stirring. But there were a score of empty cups by the sink, and a tower of crumb-covered plates on the sideboard. It seemed the only meal made in Northwich Hall was toast and tea. At last I could bear it no longer. My curiosity had grown too great to suppress. I set down my teacup and said, "How did Nate come to be cursed?" Thorn looked disappointed. "Really? Must I explain it to you again?" When I continued to stare pointedly at him, he said, "He read the wrong book, Miss Lovecraft." I balked. "So you claimed, but surely one cannot be transformed by a book." "Oh, for the love of all things hidden, woman," Thorn said, exasperated. "We sit amongst the greatest library in all the world, full of miracles that you can barely comprehend, and you think to argue with me about the nature of my half-brother's transformation. Some of the volumes on these shelves have caused the collapse of kingdoms. Some have breathed life into stars. Turning a man into a monster is child's play." He hunched his shoulders and gave a bitter sigh. "You know that Nate and I grew up together in our father's house. The portrait in the ballroom is of him, George Spencer Blackwood, the chief factor for the most prosperous fort of the Northwest Company, and a restless scholar at heart. When he retired from his post, he took his amassed fortune and began the collection of a library for the benefit of the University of Ravenswood. You've heard of it?" I shook my head. "A pity. As a center of learning and free exchange of ideas, it is unparalleled in all of Cascadia." Thorn took a nibble of toast. "The elder Mr. Blackwood was fascinated by tales of sunken countries and lost islands. He used to regale us for hours with astonishing tales, plucked from his time exploring the Arctic wastes, and we were hungry for as many uncanny stories as he could tell us. He traveled widely, corresponded with scholars and explorers, and purchased crates of books. His greatest dream was to build a grand library of the occult for the University of Ravenswood. Believe me, he was careful to keep his books locked away from prying eyes. We grew up surrounded by a labyrinth of tomes that we were forbidden to touch. Do you know how much that eats away at a curious boy's resolve? Soon after joining the chief factor's household, I became obsessed with a desire for knowledge. Little did I know then, Miss Lovecraft, that the books were exerting their powers over us, shaping us and fortifying us, influencing our development in such slow paces that no one noticed. What could I have been if I were not living in such close quarters to their foul ether?" He looked at me with pity. "What could you have been if you were not raised in Northwich's shadow? Perhaps you'd be happier too." "I'm quite happy," I insisted. "But why?" he pressed. "You have nothing to be happy about. You're without family or prospects, a forgotten spinster in charge of a piteous, moth-eaten collection of children's books, destined for no greater purpose than to care for her aging parents. And now, to make matters worse, you've fallen in love with a disgusting monstrosity that ought to be locked away, for his own safety as much as anyone else's." "How can you say such a thing about your brother?" Thorn snorted. "Because the sight of him drives the weak and infirm mad, Miss Lovecraft. Because he inspires terror, and terrified people lash out in unpredictable ways, and he will be hounded to the ends of the earth should he ever be discovered." "And yet you accompany him on his travels, even after his transformation?" Thorn shook his head sadly. We were fools, both Nate and I. We snuck into our father's library to read that which was not meant for mortal eyes. He found a volume entitled The Dowry of the Coppermaker, and read only a few paragraphs, resulting in his metamorphosis. To see his body stretch and distort, mangled by cosmic forces into the parody of an aquatic demon, I pray that you never see such a thing, Miss Lovecraft. Any human not so protected by a life lived in the book's sphere would have surely gone insane, trapped inside such a hideous form. He waved his hand dismissively. You think I am cruel to him, but in truth I have brought him here at great expense and peril in the faint hope of finding a cure for his situation. I can clearly see you're a saint. You mock me, but you don't know what I've sacrificed to help him, Thorn snarled. I have scoured the earth for a way to restore him, but I'm beginning to suspect that there's no cure to be found, and in my fool's quest to save my brother, I've somehow made all worse, and released yet another monstrosity in the world in the form of your leprous fiend, your Eidolon. What happened to the book, The Dowry of the Coppermaker? I asked. For a heartbeat, Thorn looked remorseful. Our father was a learned man, but he was not a brave one. In his horror, the elder Mr. Blackwood destroyed the book with fire and dumped the ashes in the sea, but he never recovered from the shock of losing his beloved heir, and he died only a year later, having never regained his wits. He left behind a miserable widow and a generous endowment of books to the university. Thorn's expression became one of dark satisfaction. George Spencer Blackwood went to join his mistress in whatever doldrums the afterlife affords us. I hope she abandons him to a miserable eternity, with as little thought as she abandoned me. His grin grew malicious, all teeth and gums. The old man never updated his will, so all his fortune fell to Nate, and with my half-brother's permission, yes, he gave his blessing, I adopted his persona and inherited his wealth. You must admit Nate is in no position to spend his own money. I'd hoped that miserly fool John Posey might have hidden a copy of The Dowry of the Coppermaker away on his shelves, and that we might find it within... and that we might find within it the cure for Nate's disfigurement. But so far, my search has been fruitless. He gave a helpless shrug. The library is large. I've no time to go through it all, and to be honest, the current situation demands my immediate attention. Nate will have to wait to be returned to human form. The end of God's creation will not be postponed. So, I said, you're in need of a librarian to save the world. Thorn snorted. You want the job? It's yours. Then his eyes affixed on a point behind and above me and said, Ah, you've returned. Triumphant, I hope? As quiet as a spider, Nate crawled down from the ceiling, over the floor, and slunk under the table. One pale green tentacle snaked up and slapped a dead starling next to the teapot. I jumped back, but Thorn was energized. Excellent, he exclaimed as he took up the starling and examined it closely, peering into each eye and down the beak into the throat, making growls and groans of scientific interest. The brown feathers shimmered in the lamplight as if made of oil. The starling's plumage is deceptively dull from a distance, don't you think, Miss Lovecraft? He said. It looks like nothing more than a simple brown bird, utterly unremarkable. But upon closer inspection, he stretched out one dead wing, and the drab plumage proved vibrant and iridescent under the glow. It's not pigment that causes such pretty colors, but the structure of the feathers. The starling's framework is beautiful, yet it garbs itself in brown, and so it goes about its day unassuming and unnoticed. He smirked and crooked one eyebrow. It reminds me of someone I know. From under the table, a tentacle slipped around my bare calf, pressing urgent emotions into my skin like nettles. Dread, disquietude, an unease that I had seen too much. You don't need to worry for me, I assured. I can make my own decisions, and I am not looking for a knight to save me. I wouldn't, said Thorn, and then one thin eyebrow arched. Oh, you're not speaking with me, are you, Miss Lovecraft? No, I replied, and I looked under the table to catch Nate's eye. Please don't try to keep information from me. That would only leave me naive in the face of certain danger. Satisfaction, with a hint of adoration and a measure of guilt. It's not your fault. Do not censure yourself further, I assured. If anyone is to blame, it's that craven Mr. Posey. He willfully assembled a dangerous collection and then left it unsecured. Aha, said Thorn, and he pushed the sparrow forward. Touch it, he demanded. But it was dead and dusty and spattered with gore. No, thank you, I'd rather not. I'm not asking, Miss Lovecraft, I'm ordering, he said. Put your quirk to good use. Touch it and tell me what you feel. I reached out one finger and stroked the dry feathers. A flash of red, like a slash of blood across a plaster wall. The sensation was sharp and bright, and it filled me with the feeling of a door falling off its hinges, or a box smashed with a mallet, or a pane of glass broken across concrete. The filaments of my consciousness began to unravel with the bright agony of a needle to the eye. I yelped and recoiled as if stung. Arms were all around me. They pulled me away from the table. They held me in a tight yet comforting embrace. "What did you see?" said Thorn with an eagerness that bordered on maniacal. Tears threatened. I trembled ferociously, and Nate's multitude of tentacles pushed sensations of warmth and comfort into me, fortifying me, giving me strength, piecing together the weft of my thoughts. "I saw it before," I said, "in Mrs. Rabbit's mind the morning after Earl disappeared. I don't know precisely what I saw. Blood and chalk? Broken glass, but not of a physical kind? I don't know. Words fail me." The end of one tentacle caressed my cheek and left a line of kisses. "Yes, thank you. I'm all right. I'm just startled by the intensity of it, that's all." Thorn bristled at this show of affection. He returned his attention to the dead bird in his hands. "The tongue is gone," he said, "and the body is quickly turning to ash. See?" Even now, the wings were fragile. The tips crumbled under the lightest touch. "One more time, Miss Lovecraft, before it's completely dissolved." "No, no, no." But though every loving tentacle around me protested, I reached out my hand again and seized the psychopomp in my grip. God, it burned like a coal in my palm. I felt the unbearable heat course up my arm as my mind filled with images of red and white, of bloodless meat and beating hearts. I saw the pale curve of horns, the sharp bony tips plucking the eyes from hapless victims, solid wood melting like tallow, and bodies stashed away where they'd never be found, greedy tongues slurping nourishment from gelatinous flesh. There was fog and rain and confusion, and a melody on the still air that felt like boiling water poured down my ear canals. In a meadow, lines of flowers bloomed, but their petals were made of flayed skin, and their stamens were strings of human teeth. Muted, as if through water, I heard Thorn say, "What do you see?" "Orchids and snapdragons," I whispered, straining to listen to the lyrics, "biting at my legs, eating me alive." Then the sensation swelled over my head like a wine-dark sea, and I drowned in my own animalistic fear. The East Bridge covered in pulsating pink flesh. Piles of balanced river stones, fairy pillars on Dreadmoor, murky water tumbling over and stained scarlet with blood. I saw Earl fracturing into a broken mirror, and Mrs. Rabbit in the doorway, catching the barest glimpse of the hypnotic, molten eyes that bore into her chest, the skeletal hands that stole her son. Some images made no sense, some I could not set into language, and some were too horrible to dwell upon. I closed my eyes and heard a faint, terrible, frantic screaming, and I felt pity for the poor tortured beast that made such a hopeless sound. I only realized, as darkness claimed me, that the screaming was my own. So that's the end of chapter 15. Be back tomorrow for chapter 16. Have a great afternoon, and I'll talk to you guys soon. Bye!